Okay, so let's look very briefly here at the online class I teach on Saturdays. Okay, so we talked about some of the history of the Moors and the Moors going into Europe. And I referenced Runoko Rashidi's book. We referenced the books Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, and then also Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Okay. There's a good article from National Geographic that we use in the class because we use books, video clips. There's over 50 articles that I reference in the class. There's probably about 200 slides. Who were the Moors? The Moors' ancestors were known as the Garamantes. They were a Black African people living throughout North Africa. Hannibal Barca, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, Hannibal Barca, and we dealt with the Punic Wars, and we dealt with the Battle of Cannae, 216 BC. We dealt with in 219 BC, Hannibal crossing the Alps with the elephants to stomp the Russian army. We dealt with 216 BC, the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal was outnumbered by the Roman army, and he defeats they kill about 70,000 Roman soldiers in one day. And then we talk about the Battle of Zama, 202 BC, where Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus defeats Hannibal Barca at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, right? We know that Carthage is going to be destroyed in about 143 BC or so. Carthage is going to be destroyed. Now, the Moors' ancestors were the Garamantes. They were a Black African people living throughout North Africa. Hannibal Barca was Garamanti. The Carthaginians are descendants of the Phoenicians, right? And Carthage is in the area where you have Tunisia today in North Africa, as well as St. Augustine was Garamanti also. Now, the Moors, according to George G.M. James in his book Stolen Legacy, and I had the book here on one of these stacks of books, George G.M. James in Stolen Legacy, he said that the Moors were the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mystery system. These teachings are going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. These teachings are going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. It's going to be to the detriment of African people, because everything that we taught Europeans came back to kick us in the behind. Everything that we taught them, the science, the mathematics, the nautical instruments, the algebra, the alchemy, or what we call chemistry, the periodic tables, the fire stick that's introduced, which is a long stick that fired one projectile. In Europe, they're going to produce first firearm in mid 14th century AD, somewhere 1346, 1356. But that's based upon the technology that the Moors take into Europe. Okay. Now, the word Moor is derived from the Greek word Mauros, M-A-U-R-O-S, which literally means black or very dark color, or a very dark color. Now, the Romans adopt this word and call them Mari, M-A-U-R-I, Mari. The Mari were a Northwest African people who were very dark skinned. The Romans will refer to the region of Northwest Africa as Mauritania, M-A-U-R-I-T-A-N-I-A, Mauritania, Mari. Mauritania is Latin and means the land of the black-skinned people. You'll also hear the Roman term Maurice. Maurice. Now, Romans later adopt the word as a reference for the black-skinned inhabitants they encountered in Africa. And if you read pages 527 and 187 of Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, they break this down in the book. Also, there is an excellent essay. So Runoko Rashidi has an essay in this book. So this is a book we reference in the class. So you don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in the class. And then also we use Runoko's book, Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, as well, which deals with the history of the Moors in Europe also. We know Runoko Rashidi passed away August 2nd, 2021. Runoko was a friend of mine. We had him here. I think I've interviewed him about 6 years over the past 12 years, because my first interview with Runoko was in 2010. He was the first year that I launched the African History Network show. So he was one of my first interviews. Also, Dr. Jose Clemente Bay, I think he was my third interview. Dr. Leonard Jeffries was my first interview, but I interviewed Dr. Jose Clemente Bay 10 also. And he has a fantastic essay on the history of the Moors in the book Golden Age of the Moor. Okay, now, so we talk about, of course, the Moors going in 711 AD from Morocco into the Iberian Peninsula known as Spain and Portugal, and they're going to fight against the Vandals and the Visigoths. And where they settle in southern Spain, they call Al-Andalus, which basically means to walk in the spiritual path or walk in the spiritual light, Al-Andalus. Let's see here. Variations of the word Moor. Moreno is Spanish, which means dark complexion, now meaning brunette or dark hair. Mora is Spanish. Originally, it referred to a Moorish woman, now means blackberry, the fruit, not the discontinued smartphone, but the fruit blackberry. They talk about this on page 7 of Golden Age of the Moor. Mora is Italian, which means blackberry. Morassad is French, which means dark skinned or blackamoor. And Morelan is French, which means black grape. So you see the variations of the word Moor in different languages, and we see the impact of the Moors in these different languages as well. Okay. Now there's we talk about General Tarik Ibn Ziyad as well, 711 AD, and he goes into the Iberian Peninsula, and where they land, that rock promontory, they call it Jebel Tarik, or Tarik's Mountain, which is Arabic, and is translated as Gibraltar, or what you call the Rock of Gibraltar. Okay, so the Rock of Gibraltar is named after an African man, General Tarik Ibn Ziyad, right, who leads the Moors into the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD. Now, if we look at this here, according to the Oxford Dictionary, the Moors, as early as the Middle Ages and as late as the 17th century, were commonly supposed to be black or very swarthy, and hence the word is often used for negro or negro. Early in the 8th century AD, after a grim and extended resistance to the Arab invasions of North Africa, the Moors joined the triumphant surge of Islam. Following this, they crossed over from Morocco over to the Iberian Peninsula, where their swift victories and remarkable feats soon became the substance of legends. In July of 710 AD, Tarif, with 400 foot soldiers and 100 horses, all Berbers, successfully carried out a mission in southern Iberia. Tarif, an important port city in southern Spain, is named after him. Okay, then in 711 AD, so that's the reconnaissance mission to get the lay of the land in 710 AD, because you had emissaries, you had the Sephardim, who were Jews who converted to Christianity. They're there in Spain being persecuted by the Vandals and the Visigoths. They send emissaries into Morocco and ask the Moors to come in to rescue them. And the Moors go and fight against these barbarians, the Vandals and the Visigoths, and defeat them. Okay, and they take control of portions of what today we call Spain. All right, this is how the Moors get in. This is why they end up basically in Spain in the first place. That they should have just, I wouldn't answer the telephone if you understand what happened after all that. I wouldn't, but yeah, it is what it is. But anyway. I can understand wanting to help people, but I'll be so we talked about Saint Maurice, who became a patron saint of Germany. We broke down what are patron saints and explained the history behind patron saints. And the patron saints are going to take the place of the Neteru. In Christianity, the patron saints are going to take the place of the Neteru. Okay, and patron saints are saints that watch over groups of people, watch over different cities that people pray to, etc. But Saint Maurice, who was a Moor and a Christian, okay, and Renoko Rashidi has a piece dealing with, as an article for AtlantaBlackStar.com, dealing with the Black Saint Maurice, Knight of the Holy Lance. Saint Maurice refuses to persecute some Christians, okay. And he's Christian himself, and he and his army allow him to get killed. All right. So he becomes a patron saint to Germany. There's a good piece on Tarik Ibn Ziyad from Britannica.com, Encyclopedia Britannica. And I use Britannica. One, they have good information. Two, I have a monthly subscription to Britannica. I pay them each month, and I'm trying to get my money's worth out of these subscriptions. I pay National Geographic, was it $24.99 a month? I just signed up for Wall Street Journal. That's $8 a month. I just signed up. I got the Los Angeles Times for $1 for 6 months because I got a better deal than I had with them like 6 months ago. Time Magazine, they want to charge me $19 a month, but I just signed up again with Time Magazine. I think I use a different email address, so I just signed up with Time Magazine. I get, what am I paying them, $1 for the first month or something crazy like that. So what I try to do is try to renegotiate the terms of the agreement after the initial subscription fee. You know, they sign you up for $1 for a month, and then it goes to $25 after that or something like that. So I try to like renegotiate, okay? Try to control expenses. So Tarik Ibn Ziyad, Britannica.com has some good information on this. Musa ibn Nusayr, the Arab conqueror of Morocco, left his general Tarik Ibn Ziyad to govern Tangier in his place. Spain at this time was under Visigothic rule. So see, this ties into the history, right, of these Vandals. Now, the Vandals and the Visigoths crushed the western portion of the Roman Empire in 476 AD and cast Europe into what's known as the Dark Ages. The Vandals and the Visigoths, they crushed the western portion of the Roman Empire, 476 AD. All right. And you're going to have this period of time of famine, strife, civil war, not a lot of inventions taking place during the Dark Ages. And it's going to go from 5th century AD to about the 1300s. Okay, about the 1300s, the Dark Ages. So Musa ibn Nasser, the Arab conqueror of Morocco, left his general Tarik to govern Tangier in his place. Spain at this time was under Visigothic rule, but was rent by civil war. Okay, they were dealing with a lot of civil war in Spain at this time. Now, the dispossessed sons of the recently deceased Visigothic king of Spain, Witiza, appealed to the Muslims for help in the civil war. Okay, the dispossessed sons of the Visigothic king of Spain, Witiza, appealed to the Muslims for help in the civil war, and they quickly responded to this request in order to conquer Spain for themselves. But also, the Sephardim, the Sephardic Jews in Spain, they sent emissaries into Morocco to ask for help from the Moors because they're being persecuted by the Vandals and the Visigoths. In May 711 AD, Tarik ibn Ziyad landed on Gibraltar, Jebel Tarik, Tarik's mountain, with an army of 7,000 men. Now, depending upon the source, the number of men he arrived with may vary, but he showed up with thousands of men, mostly Berbers, Syrians, and Yemenis. Gibraltar henceforth became known as Jebel Tarik, Mount Tarik, for which the anglicized form of the name is adapted, Gibraltar. Okay. Tarik soon advanced to the Spanish mainland itself, gaining valuable support from Spanish Jews who had been persecuted by the Visigoths and from Christian supporters of Witiza's sons, okay, the Visigothic king. In July 711 AD, Tarik ibn Ziyad defeated the forces of the Visigothic usurper king Roderick at an undetermined location. He then immediately marched upon Tarik ibn Ziyad, Toledo, the capital of Spain, and occupied that city against little resistance. He also conquered Cordoba. Musa ibn Nasser himself arrived in Spain with a force of more than 18,000 in 712 AD, Common Era, and together the two generals occupied more than 2/3 of the Iberian Peninsula, today called Spain and Portugal, in the next few years. In 714 Common Era, Musa and Tarik ibn Ziyad were summoned by the Caliph back to Damascus, where they were both accused of misappropriation of funds and died in obscurity. So we take you through our history. We look at this history chronologically. We deal with why there are African Moors heads on the national flags of Corsica and Sardinia. And right around page 90 of Runoko Rashidi's book, he shows this, and he deals with we also deal with the Black Madonna and Child as well, because that ties into Asar, Arset, and Heru. And even before the Moors go into Europe, the Europeans have the statues of the Black Madonna and Child, which goes back to Asar, Arset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, the first Holy Trinity. Now, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you never heard it before, disagree with it, or don't like it, does not mean it's not true. Just means you have to do some research to understand what it is that I'm talking about. Okay. And in various ways, and Sister Nubia Wartford, who's a brilliant archaeologist here in Detroit, or cultural, she calls herself a cultural anthropologist. She's a cultural anthropologist. She goes to the Sudan to do archaeological digs, right? She can explain this portion of it better than I can. But Sister Nubia, and we've had her here on the African History Network show for a number of times throughout the years, she does presentations dealing with how the iconography in the Christian church has preserved African culture and the African spirituality coming from ancient Kemet. A lot of this is preserved in Christianity. It's just not talked about a lot. It's not highlighted. A lot of people see these things but don't know what they're looking at, right? So if we look at right here on page 90 and 91 of Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe by Runoko Rashidi. He took pictures. You know, Runoko traveled around the world, about 125, 130 countries and islands. And he shows you statues and paintings of the Black Madonna Child throughout Europe. Switzerland, we see it in Switzerland. We see it in Poland, Saskatchewan, Poland, right here. This is Switzerland here, statue. We see the painting here in Poland. The Black Virgin of Madrid, Spain. This statue here. Black Virgin and Child statue in St. John's Church, Luxembourg City, Luxembourg. Okay. We see the national flag of Sardinia, which is an Italian island with the 4 African Moors heads on it. We see the coat of arms of Pope Benedict XVI with the head of a Moorish king, because a lot of Europeans have a lot of these, because the Moors intermix into the European population, into the bloodstream. The African male Moors were having sex with white women. Okay, it is what it is. Dr. John Henrik Clark said, black men are natural born sweet talkers wherever we go. They were intermixing into the European population, changing the complexion to various extents of Europeans throughout where they go, especially in Spain and Portugal, because Spain and Portugal is right above, because it's right above Morocco. They got the brunt of it. Okay, Spain and Portugal got the brunt of it. It happened in England also, but to a lesser extent in England, because England was further away from Morocco. Okay. But if we look at this here, and I'm not sure why that's flashing, but if we look at this here, we go back, let's go to the map of Al-Andalus right here. So we look at it geographically, there's just a very short distance between Morocco and Spain. So Spain and Portugal get the brunt of it. Also, Portugal is the first one involved in the transatlantic slave trade, basically 1441 Common Era AD, with Anton Gonsalves going into Mauritania, which is a short distance from Portugal. Okay. And then the Spanish are right behind. They're the second ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The Spanish are right behind the Portuguese. Okay, so we take you through our history. We deal with this history chronologically. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. We deal with thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We deal with the African presence in the Americas going back at least 51,700 years ago. We reference work from Dr. David Imhotep. That's one of the sources, not the only one. Page 14 of his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, and I have that book behind me. He deals with the discovery by Dr. Albert Goodyear in Allendale County, South Carolina, 2004, 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. And one of the things we do is we look at a number of different archaeological discoveries that have happened in like the last 10 or 12 years that are causing the archaeologists, scientists, paleontologists to totally rethink everything. And when these discoveries come out, it causes them to have to push the timelines back. They talk about how they have to rethink all of this, push the timelines back, especially the discovery that came out in June 2017 in Morocco when they found remains of Homo sapiens dating back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. And that pushed the timeline back because before that, the oldest fossils of Homo sapiens, modern man, were found in Ethiopia that dated back 195,000 years ago. The discovery that came out in June 2017 in Morocco just blew all of this out of the water. Okay, this article right here is from 2004, and this is from ScienceDaily.com. This is about Dr. Albert Goodyear's discovery. Here's a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. He's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. You can still read this article. It's still up. New evidence puts man in North America at least 50,000 years ago. November 18th, 2008 from ScienceDaily.com, which is a scientific website. They have different scientific discoveries there, but there are other news sources that reported on this finding as well. Radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains, where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts were at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America before the last ice age, okay? So who were these humans? These were the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet. Science magazine has an article from around October 2012 that talks about the Khoisan, who are the ancestors of the Ainu and the Twa. They went all around the world, and they were also here in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. In October 2012, genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so easily from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. Now, here's a picture of a couple of Khoisan sisters, okay, a couple of Khoisan women that are short-statured Africans. Now, the Khoisan live mainly in southern Africa in territories spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into two groups: hunters and gatherers, called the Sans people, S-A-N-S, and keepers of the livestock, called the Khoi people. The Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds that are not found in the languages of their neighbors. And the click language was the original language. Okay, the click language was the original language. And in the movie Black Panther, the language spoken in the film Black Panther is Isikosa, okay, because we deal with the film Black Panther, because African culture is all throughout and history is all throughout the film Black Panther. Okay, I did 3 months of research on the film Black Panther as well as the comic book to be able to do my lectures on that, on the film. The Panther deity that we see in Black Panther, Bastet, or Bast, I should say Bast, the Panther deity, that comes straight out of Ancient Kemet. That comes from the nectar Bastet, okay, that was worshipped as early as Second Dynasty around 2890 BCE. So Bast or Bastet was an ancient Kemetic or Egyptian goddess or neter worshipped in the form of a lioness and then later a cat. She was the goddess of warfare in Lower Kemet, Lower Egypt. Okay, so Bast that you see, a lot of stuff that you see in the film is not made up. There were 11 different African cultures that we saw represented in the film Black Panther. Okay, Ruth Carter, who was the costume designer, she spent 6 months researching African cultures. So when we look at the Dora Milaje, right, the Dora Milaje, who were the African female warriors, I think I have a slide here on the Dora Milaje, the African female warriors that we see depicted in the film Black Panther, they were influenced from the where their costume comes from the Maasai of Kenya and Tanzania. Okay, the real life inspiration for the Dora Milaje are the African female warriors called the Ohozi or the Mino, okay, of Dahomey, modern day Benin. And this is where these African female warriors, this was the real life inspiration for the Dora Milaje. The Dora Milaje were introduced, I think it was around 1998 in the Black Panther comic books. They were introduced. Dora Milaje means adored ones. Okay, so in my presentation on Black Panther, and we'll pull this slide up here. I'll show you this one here because we deal with the film Black Panther in the class because there's a lot of culture, African culture, history related in the film. Where are we? Right here. The Dora Milaje of Wakanda come from Dahomey, Republic of Benin. Right here. Okay. So where we go right here. So they come from the Ohozi or the Mino. Now, these are the African female warriors that are depicted in the new movie coming out September 16th, 2022, starring Viola Davis, called The Woman King. The Woman King. And it deals with these African female warriors who are fighting against the French colonizers. It deals with the Franco-Dahomean Wars, okay? Fighting against the French colonizers in the late 1800s, okay? Now, some people say, oh, well, these African female warriors, they were used to capture other Africans and enslave them, things like this. That's true. African history is not perfect, just like European history is not perfect. Europeans were enslaving each other for hundreds of years. Neither one was right, but it happened. But also, these African female warriors fought against the French colonizers as well. Okay, African history, just like European history, is not perfect. Europeans were killing each other for hundreds of years, even before they became nations, when they were kingdoms. And you had the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Lombards, the Jutes, the Anglos, the Saxons, the Picts, the Alans, these Germanic people collectively called barbarians who were fighting and killing each other. Okay, they're fighting and killing each other, just like the Vandals and the Visigoths crushed the western portion of the Roman Empire and cast Europe into the Dark Ages. Okay, then these kingdoms are going to become nations, and they're going to keep fighting one another. And then they become Spain and Portugal and the Netherlands and England, Great Britain, things like this, France, Germany, and then they're fighting each other and killing each other over the transatlantic slave trade, control of the transatlantic slave trade, over Africa, over the new lands that are being conquered, even going back to Christopher Columbus and his 4 voyages. And we see that these different areas that Columbus is conquering fall into the hands of other people. So the French get control of the western third of the island of Hispaniola and call it Saint Dominique, which becomes Haiti, where the Haitian Revolution is. Okay, we're going to see that the British take control of Jamaica because Columbus conquers Jamaica in 1494. We see the Treaty of Tordesillas in about the 15th century, the Treaty of Tordesillas, and the Pope tells Spain and Portugal to stop fighting amongst yourselves and go out and conquer these non-Christian people. And the Pope divides the non-Christian world among Spain and Portugal and sends them out to conquer Spain and Portugal. Because these European nations who were formed originally hundreds of years prior by barbarians were fighting and killing each other. Then when they become nations, they continue to fight and kill each other. And then they have world wars, continue to fight and kill each other. Okay. So Germany, okay, and France and Great Britain and all this. So they go from barbarians to kingdoms to nation states to World War I, World War II. Europeans been fighting and killing each other over 1,000 years. And you have wars between different African nations and things like that also. Nobody's history is perfect. Okay. So we deal with all this history. And the second class that I teach, the one I teach on Sundays, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. That class basically picks up where the first one, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, leaves off. So we pick up the second class, we pick up in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution. And then so you talk about the Haitian Revolution. So then you got to go back to Christopher Columbus and his 4 voyages, because Columbus conquers Haiti. So you see how all this is connected. And Columbus set sail on his first of 4 voyages, August 3rd, 1492, the day after the Sephardim, the Sephardic Jews, are expelled out of Spain. And later in the same year that the Moors lose control of the last stronghold, Granada, January 2nd, 1492. All this history is connected. So you can't talk about the transatlantic slave trade without talking about Christopher Columbus. I know we don't want to talk about Columbus. You have to talk about Columbus. A lot of this has to do with Columbus and these island nations where Columbus goes and conquers and decimates, rapes and pillages. They've never recovered from what happened. Haiti is still dealing with what happened over 500 years ago. Okay. Cuba. And then you have the Spanish-American War of 1898, and Cuba's fighting against Spain for their independence because Spain conquered Cuba. It was Columbus that conquered Spain in 1492. These island nations have never recovered from what these Europeans did to them. And contrary to popular belief, Columbus never comes to the land that we call the United States of America, this contiguous landmass, contiguous meaning connected. He never, Alaska and Hawaii are not part of the contiguous United States, okay? So his first voyage, August 3rd, 1492, he set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He lands in the Bahamas, October 12th, 1492. So this is why some people celebrate Columbus Day, October 12th, 1492. I celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day because there was African people in this land we call the U.S. and also in some of these other areas that he conquered. There were African people there before he even got there. So African Americans should celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous Peoples Day includes African Americans also. That does not mean the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. Some people just want to claim slavery. We got to claim slavery. Oh, you're trying to take slavery away from us? No. You need to understand a chronology of history of the last 50,000 years of history, not just the last 500 years of history. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened. Okay, we're not trying to take slavery away from it. We're not trying to say, oh, African people weren't slaves, because some people, that's just their claim to fame, slavery. No, slavery did happen. But you got to understand tens of thousands of years of history and that chronology of history before 1441, before 1555, before 1526, and the Spanish are taking Africans into the territory we call Georgia and South Carolina today. 93 years before August 19th, 20th, 1619. That's 93 years before that. The Spanish are taking Africans into South Carolina, the territory we call South Carolina. Okay, so he goes into the Bahamas. He goes into his first voyage, Cuba, Hispaniola. His second voyage, September 1493 goes into the West Indies and Puerto Rico and Jamaica, 1494. All this is Spain. Okay? King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, these Spanish invaders. All this is Spain doing all this treachery, killing tens of thousands of people. Actually, I'm sorry, millions of people. It was millions of people. Third voyage, May 1498, Trinidad and Venezuelan mainland. Fourth voyage and last voyage, May 1504, Panama and Honduras. So number one, Columbus never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. So please stop teaching our children. Please stop saying this in school. Columbus discovered America. There was already Native Americans and African people there, number one. Two, he had some Moors navigating his ships. A lot of people like Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay and Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, and Professor Kaba is one of my teachers. A lot of them don't think Columbus was lost in the first place because, as Professor Kaba says, a third grader knows that based upon where the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening, you know which direction you're going in. And he had Moors navigating his ships, like the Pedro Alonso Nino, the Nino brothers, things like this. So it's really believed by like real scholars that Columbus knew where he was going. He wasn't lost. He's using nautical instruments also based upon the technology that the Moors introduced into Europe, which is another problem. Once again, this is why I say I wish we never taught them, because personally, when we really study this history and look at it chronologically, the transatlantic slave trade is really Europeans getting revenge on the African Moors and what the Moors did in Europe. And because the Moors are going to Africanize various parts of Europe to various degrees, the Moors are going to intermix into the European population and change the complexion of many Europeans, intermix into the European bloodline. And one of the things they're going to do, especially like the Spanish, when they set up their colonies, one of the things they're going to do is forbid intermixing with, especially in the Spanish colonies, they forbid intermixing between the races. And the Spanish are going to forbid when they conquer the slaves, when they enslave people and take them into these colonies, they're going to forbid them to learn to read and write also. Well, it's the Moors that taught a lot of the Spanish to read and write. All this stuff comes back to kick us in the behind. So we deal with all of this history. And then in the second class, we deal with history from 1803 through 1968. Okay, and that's a deep class there also. We had a good sessions today, and we dealt with the Reconstruction Era. And with Reconstruction is a period of history that is not talked about a lot. Okay, Reconstruction is directly related to what's going on today. The political violence that we see, the voter suppression laws that we see. I talked about this article here in class today. This is from Time Magazine, because like I said, I monitor about 35 different news sources on a daily basis. So I pull articles from all different news sources: National Geographic, Time Magazine, Washington Post, New York Times, everything, NBC News, all different types of sources. This article right here came out January 12th, 2021. January 12th, 2022, I should say. This is 1 year, 6 months after the January 6th, 2021 insurrection. This article helps to bring all this stuff together, connect all this together. This is something I've been talking about. This is related to the meeting that President Joe Biden had with historians on August 4th. And it dealt with how these historians are telling President Joe Biden, they're warning him that America's democracy is teetering, and they're talking about what leads up. They're talking about the years that lead up to the 1860 presidential election that Lincoln won, and what leads up to the Civil War taking place. Well, if we look at this article here, this deals with Reconstruction. 1865 to 1877, and how the Reconstruction era is not properly taught in schools across the country. Okay. 45 states, and let me pull up this briefly here. I'm going to pull up the presentation that we class for from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay, let's close some of this other stuff out. A new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. Okay, this deals with the Reconstruction era. It draws a direct relationship between that history and the political violence we saw January 6, 2021. One of the foremost authorities on the Reconstruction era is Eric Foner, historian and Pulitzer Prize winning author Eric Foner, author of the book Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. Now, he said in an interview a week after the January 6, 2021 insurrection, interview with New Yorker magazine, the article starts out and says, in the aftermath of the insurrection a year ago at the U.S. Capitol, many leading historians drew parallels between the violence that we saw January 6, 2021, and the Reconstruction era, the period of political revolution directly following the U.S. Civil War, which is 1861, 1875. Historian Eric Foner said, quote, the events we saw reminded me very much of the Reconstruction era and the overthrow of Reconstruction. And the overthrow of Reconstruction, which was often accompanied or accomplished, I should say, by violent assaults on elected officials. By violent assaults on elected officials. The difference is you didn't have a sitting president sending domestic terrorists to storm the U.S. Capitol building like you did January 6, 2021. Now, scholars say studying the aftermath of the Civil War, which is the Reconstruction era, can put in context many of the seminal events in the U.S. in recent years, from the brutal murder of George Floyd by police in 2021 to the voter suppression laws enacted after African-American voters played a big role in helping Joe Biden and Kamala Harris be elected president and vice president. Okay. And that's reminiscent. So it starts out in Georgia with Senate Bill 202, crafted by Heritage Action for America, and Jessica Anderson, who's the executive director of Heritage Action for America, which is the sister organization to the Heritage Foundation, is going to be Paul Weyrich, who's a co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, but also ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, is going to be Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell in 1980, who create this whole religious right movement, which leads to about 42 years later, overturning Roe versus Wade. The seeds of that goes back to 1980 and Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell. But despite the timeliness of the era in today's climate, many students in American schools will not get a full education on the Reconstruction period until they go to college, but most of them go to college. In social studies standards for 45 out of 50 states and the District of Columbia, discussion of Reconstruction is partial or non-existent. Discussion of Reconstruction is partial or non-existent, according to historians who have reviewed how the period is discussed in K through 12 studies, study standards for public schools nationwide. Now, this basically is before the these anti-critical race theory laws start popping up. It was partial or non-existent basically before those laws, because the anti-critical race theory laws are so vague in many states. It's creating fear and anxiety amongst teachers. So they're confused on what they can teach. So they're less likely to really dig into and teach the history of slavery and Jim Crow segregation and white supremacy and racism, things like this, because they don't want to get fired from the job. Understandably so. They don't want to be sued, understandably so. A lot of these laws are so vague, they're confused on what they can and can't teach. Now, in a report produced by the education nonprofit, the Zen Education Project, and we use some of their articles in our classes, the study's authors say they are concerned that American children will grow up to be uninformed about a critical period of history that helps to explain why full racial equality remains unfulfilled today. This is what's going on today is directly related to what happened during Reconstruction, the overthrow of Reconstruction, the compromise of 1877 between the Democrats and Republicans, where neither one, Rutherford B. Hayes or Samuel J. Tilden, had enough electoral college votes to become president. They cut a backroom deal. The Republicans say, you let Rutherford B. Hayes become president, he'll remove the remaining Union troops out of the South to allow the Southern segregationists to take back full control of the Southern government, state and local governments. And this is what happens. Okay. Then they're going to impose poll taxes, starting with Florida in 1889. Now look at what's going on in Florida. See, Florida needs to be desanitized. You got Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. Florida needs to be desanitized. For re-election, he needs to be defeated. Okay. November 2022. Elections have consequences. These elections have deadly results. So if Andrew Gillum was governor of Florida, especially during COVID-19, I guarantee you he would have saved a lot more lives. He would have been more prudent. He would have followed the science. He would not have been so cavalier in handling COVID. He would have shut down the schools sooner. He would have saved a lot. He would have saved thousands of people's lives. He would have saved thousands of people's lives, including African-American lives. But you had Ron DeSantis as governor, anti-science, don't say gay bill, Ron DeSantis. So Florida needs to be desanitized. The Mississippi plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. The Mississippi plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. So after you have the overthrow of Reconstruction, then you have, like in about 1881, the Tennessee state legislature, they're going to pass laws to segregate streetcars and public transportation, things like this. Florida, 1889, passes the first poll taxes. So they charge, you have to pay a tax to register to vote, which will exclude a lot of African Americans because we couldn't pay the poll tax. What Mississippi did in 1890 became copied by the other southern states. South Carolina, 1895, Louisiana, 1891, Alabama, 1901, Georgia, North Carolina, things like this. The Mississippi plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890, we came here to exclude the Negro. Now, this is a direct quote from Solomon Saladin Calhoun, who was the White County judge who presided over the Mississippi State Convention. And he said, let's tell the truth. When it came to why they were there, he put the voting issue bluntly. He said, let's tell the truth. If it burst the bottom of the universe, he said, quote, we came here to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer. This is a direct quote. This is how devious these people were. African Americans were the majority of the voters in Mississippi. They purposely rewrote the state constitution to impose poll taxes and literacy tests to suppress the African American vote, which is exactly why you had to have a Voting Rights Act in 1965. So when we look at, so we deal with all this in this 10-week online class that I teach on Sundays, normally Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1868. Now, I've been studying history 30 years. I'm the one that put together all this content for both classes. This is a hell of a lot of work, okay? Because the first class that I teach, the one on Saturdays, that I started teaching that class in 2017. It evolved out of a 4.5-hour lecture that I did in 2014 called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade. That lecture was the culmination of 7 years of research. And then over time, that developed into an online course and it's exploded into what it is today. But I had so much information and I wanted to focus in on this second period of history because there's so much going on from 1803 with the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase. It's so much going on from 1803 to 1968, just that period of history. And we really need to go deep into that and analyze what happened. That I had to create a second. I couldn't get all that information into the first class. I had to create a second class so we can get deep into this history. Okay, so what happens is that delegates eventually adopted a literacy test and poll tax geared to suppress the black vote in a state with a black majority. Mississippi had an African-American majority. When you look at South Carolina, the majority during Reconstruction, there were 2,000 approximately African-American men who got elected to public office nationwide. And 90% of African-Americans were in the South, okay? Even up until 1910, 5 years before the Great Migration begins, 90% of African-Americans are in the South. The Mississippi Plan became the model throughout the South, part of a raft of racially oppressive Jim Crow laws that ends Reconstruction. So the other Southern states adopt what Mississippi did. Okay. So if we look at this piece right here, and we talked about this in class today from the Zen Education Project. So when you register for this class, you can go watch the entire, we did 2 hours today. You can go watch the entire class and you can go watch the previous classes because they're all archived. Okay. If we look at this piece right here from the Zen Education Project, how's everybody doing? How y'all like this type of information? You can post your comments here on the thread of the broadcast. Are you learning anything? You like this type of information? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like. This article here from the Zen Education Project, November 1st, 1890, Mississippi Constitution. Okay. Now, if you watched Eyes on the Prize, and I have the Eyes on the Prize box set, I ordered it from Amazon.com. I have the Eyes on the Prize box set documentary. When they talk about the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and Eyes on the Prize, they talk about the Mississippi State Convention of 1890. So it was on November 1st, 1890, Mississippi adopted a new constitution with a poll tax and arbitrary literacy test for voting, sections designed to disenfranchise newly franchised African Americans and some poor whites. The new constitution was a nail in the coffin for Mississippi Reconstruction and a win for voter suppression. It brought an end to the period of democratic progress that followed the Civil War when African Americans were the majority of eligible voters in Mississippi. African Americans were the majority of eligible voters in Mississippi, and these white supremacists, along with a simple Simon-ass Negro named Isaiah T. Montgomery. Isaiah T. Montgomery was the founder of Bayou, Mississippi. He was a former slave to the brother of Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was from Mississippi, and he was the president of the Confederacy. And Isaiah T. Montgomery voted along with these white supremacists to suppress the African-American vote. And Frederick Douglass excoriated him, rightfully so. And personally, I don't know this for certain, but I think Isaiah T. Montgomery is a distant relative of Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, the black Republican senator who blocked the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the black Republican senator who voted against Kristen Clark to be Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, the African-American woman. This Negro voted against her. That Tim Scott. I think he's related to Isaiah T. Montgomery. If he's not, they're play cousins. If they're not related by blood, they're play cousins. So what happens is that the other Southern states do the same thing that Mississippi does. Okay, this can be seen in so if we go back here, every Southern state instituted literacy tests and poll taxes to effectively remove African Americans from the citizenship they were supposed to have been guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of 1868. This can be seen in the state constitutions with similar voter suppression statutes adopted by South Carolina 1895, Louisiana 1898. Then Louisiana is going to institute the grandfather clause, which states that if your grandfather prior to 1867 could not vote, then you can't vote. Another way to get around the 15th Amendment of 1870. North Carolina 1900, Alabama 1901. Alabama still has racist language in their state constitution because there was an Alabama Reconstruction Constitution in 1867 that is going to create a public school system. And during Reconstruction, African Americans are showing America how to have a democracy. That gets overthrown. They come with the Alabama State Constitution in 1901 that institutes poll taxes and literacy tests and puts in place segregation. So in Montgomery, Alabama, when they have the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 that starts Monday morning, December 5th, 1955, people misunderstand the Montgomery bus boycott and think it was about African Americans want to sit at the front of the bus with white people. No, they wanted to break the back of segregation in Montgomery, Alabama, which was the capital of Alabama, and then eventually destroy segregation in all of Alabama. But segregation is written into the state constitution. So they go to the federal government for help because they knew they couldn't get help at the state government. Because hell, in 1957, the state legislature in Alabama redrew the district lines in Tuskegee, okay, to lock out almost all of the African American voters in Tuskegee, Alabama. This leads to economic boycott that's four times as long as the Montgomery bus boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott was 381 days. The Tuskegee, Alabama economic boycott goes from 1957 to 1961, which leads to the U.S. Supreme Court case of Gomillion versus Lightfoot, because they sue the state legislature because the state legislature is purposely trying to gerrymander the district to reduce the political power of African American voters there in Tuskegee, Alabama. This is how devious these people are, where their sons and daughters, their grandchildren are doing the same damn thing in Republican state legislatures across the country. This is why we got to pull our head out of our asses and connect what's going on today to this history and understand how all this is connected. But now they're trying to suppress not just the vote of African Americans, but Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and many white people who vote for Democrats and not Republicans. Because there was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris got 81 million votes. 49 million of those votes, 61% came from white people. I know people like to think that the majority of the votes came from African Americans. No, they didn't. He got 81 million votes. There's only 30 million African Americans registered to vote. 16.9 million voted. 9.7 million Latinos voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But 49 million white people voted. 61%, more than 50% of his votes came from white people. Okay, so check this out. This is just a fraction of the type of information that we deal with in this class. So give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. How you like this type of information? Okay, Ruby, how you doing, Ruby? Okay, so you can register for these online classes. I'm gonna post the link here. Now we have a bundle pack. You can register for both classes for $100. Okay, because normally these classes are $130 each. We haven't discounted the $30 each. And I'm going to post a link here for the bundle. Post a link here for the bundle pack. As soon as you register, you can start watching content, or you can go to our new website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime, a year from now, 2 years from now. You go back and watch the entire class, either one of these classes. Okay. And you can use this information with your children also. So this is the second class, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement of Black Power, 1865 to 1968. There's a ton of information in this class. And I created the curriculum for this as well. Both of these classes, I created the curriculum. Click right here to register here. For the bundle pack, click right. We have the information for the bundle. Click right here for the bundle. You get both classes for $100. It's about a $385 value because it's going to be bonus lectures that you get in digital format from me also when you register for this. If you've taken any of my online classes in the past, email me and you'll get a 50% discount. Email me at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, or just click right here, contact the African History Network. Just click right there and you can email us right through the website. Okay, just click right there, contact us. All right. And this is some of the slides we deal with in the second class, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement of Black Power, 1865 to 1960. And like I said, we start out with the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution, and deal with how those two events are related. Okay, right here. We deal with the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution and how those two events are related. And then we go out through history chronologically, basically year by year, and deal with what leads up to the Civil War taking place. We talk about the Missouri Compromise of 1820, Texas Revolution 1836, Mexican-American War 1846, 1848, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo 1848, where the U.S. gets California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada from Mexico for $15 million. Mexico loses about a third of their land. Okay, the Mexican-American War, which leads to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. We deal with the Compromise of 1850, which deals with organizing the land that the U.S. got from Mexico. And the Compromise of 1850 includes, it consists of 5 bills. And one of those bills, the fifth one, is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which intensifies the abolitionist movement, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Then you have the Harriet Beecher Stowe writing her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852, which also intensifies the abolitionist movement and exposes America to the horrors of slavery. It becomes an international bestseller, sells 300,000 copies its first year. It's based upon the autobiography of a real life man named Josiah Henson, who was a slave in Maryland, and he and his family run away from Maryland and go up north and then go into Canada. So Harriet Beecher Stowe reads his autobiography, and she patterns the fictitious character of Uncle Tom in the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. That's patterned after the real life runaway slave Josiah Henson. That talked about in an episode of The Jeffersons, where Louisa's uncle comes to visit, and he's played by the same actor who played Fred C. Davis on Good Times, and he was Fred Sanford's cousin Grady, bald-headed cousin Grady on Sanford and Son. Grady, you better go join your lady. Remember when Betty Jean comes to visit, heavyset Betty Jean, and then Lamont's going to marry her because she has a dowry. Okay, so that Grady with the bald head who played Fred's cousin, he was on an episode of The Jeffersons, and he breaks down the history of Josiah Henson. So we talk about the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. As a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which opens up slavery in the Kansas-Nebraska territory and leaves up to people living in those territories to determine whether or not they want to have slavery, as opposed to it being dictated by the federal government. This is going to lead to the Republican Party being founded in 1854 as a backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Republican Party is founded largely by groups of abolitionists. And in 1860, their candidate for president, November 1860, Abraham Lincoln, becomes president-elect. 6 weeks later, South Carolina secedes from the Union December 20th, 1860, because they think Lincoln's going to free the slaves. They're going to be followed by other states going into February and March of 1861. You're going to have the Confederate States of America that's founded right around March of 1861. April 12th, 1861, you have the attack on Fort Sumter, which was a federal stronghold, military stronghold in South Carolina. It's attacked because those in South Carolina are trying to get the Union troops out of the South. And this is what launches the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, which goes from 1861 to 1865. So we deal with Juneteenth. We deal with the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. One of the things we talked about in class today is how the 15th Amendment, nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it explicitly give anyone the right to vote. In this article right here from Smithsonian Institute, si.edu, americanhistory.si.edu, which is from the Smithsonian Institute, this article entitled, "Does an Amendment Give You the Right to Vote?" Okay, does an amendment give you the right to vote? Now, this article came out February 3rd, 2020, and I did a lecture around this time when this article came out. February 3rd, 2020 was the 150th anniversary of the adoption of the 15th Amendment of 1870, which guaranteed the right to vote for African-American men. But nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it explicitly give anyone the right to vote. And even the 15th Amendment says there are only two sections to the 15th Amendment. Section 1 says the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now, section 2, so it's saying that you cannot put impediments in the way of the right to vote. It's guaranteeing the right to vote. But nowhere, as this slide says here, and this comes directly from the article from Smithsonian Institute, as written, the 15th Amendment does not explicitly grant anyone the right to vote. Instead, it prohibits federal and state governments from placing restrictions on voting based on three criteria: race, color, and previous condition of servitude. The entire amendment is 2 sentences long. Now, the second section of the 15th Amendment of 1870 says the Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Now, amendment means to alter or to change. Prior to 1870, what gave people the right to vote? And it was largely white men voting. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that explicitly gives anyone the right to vote. And then the 19th Amendment of 1920, which guaranteed the right to vote to women, and the 26th Amendment of 1971 that lowered the minimum age to vote from 21 to 18, the structure of that language in those two amendments is based upon the structure of the language in the 15th Amendment. Now, Justice Anthony Scalia, before he died, he actually said that nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it give anyone the right to vote. He's correct. I despise him, but he's correct. Okay. So we deal with this history chronologically. This is normally a 10-week online course. As soon as you register, we did class 7 today. There's going to be, we'll probably have 12 sessions this time around instead of 10, because early on, this has been a very, very bad allergy season. Okay. Those that are allergic to pollen know what I'm talking about. So early on, like the first couple of sessions, I had to cut them short because my allergies were killing me. I could only talk 30 minutes, 45 minutes. The allergies are much better now. This is probably the worst allergy season I've seen in the past 5 to 7 years. Okay. So we're going to probably do 12 sessions. But once again, all the sessions we do live, they're archived. You can watch them anytime. Of course, we talk about the Mississippi State Convention in 1890. Right here, Vicksburg Massacre, 1874. We go look at these massacres. You follow Massacre, 1874. You follow Alabama, Vicksburg Massacre, Clinton, Mississippi Massacre, 1875. You have to go look at these massacres because they were attacking African-American voting rights, political violence to intimidate us, to keep us from voting. Just like today, just like the attack on the U.S. Capitol. And you have to understand how devious Trump is. This is why this demon can never become president again. Because what he did weeks leading up to the January 6, 2021 insurrection, he targeted 4 cities that had high African-American populations and called for, he said that the votes were illegal. There were fraudulent votes. He called for recounting of the votes. What were those 4 cities? Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. He targeted these 4 cities that have a high African-American population. Okay. And he incited these white supremacist domestic terrorists and said that they're look, I live 4 minutes away from the TCF Center, downtown Detroit. There were Trump supporters outside trying to get inside while the vote counting was going on. I live 4 minutes away from the TCF Center in downtown Detroit. I drove by there. The police had it blocked off. You couldn't even get, after a certain time, they had it blocked off. Okay? This is what this demon incited. This is why this domestic terrorist can never hold political office. His ass belongs in prison. He can never hold political office ever again. Okay? That cannot happen. Because the second time, they're going to complete the coup. The first time was a dress rehearsal. The second time, they're going to complete the coup. Because now what this demon is doing is putting election deniers in place to be over elections. So Doug Mastriano is running for governor of Pennsylvania. He has to be defeated because the governor of Pennsylvania appoints the Secretary of State. He already said he's going to support a Secretary of State who will overthrow election results and do what Trump wants to do. You got Kerry Lake running for governor of Arizona, another election denier, another person that must be defeated. This is a continuation of the Civil War and Reconstruction. These people are not playing games. They're playing for keeps. We got to get our head out of our asses. Stop listening to negative corporate-controlled hip-hop that dumbs us down and understand what's really going on. This is a continuation of the Civil War and Reconstruction. And now you got all these armed domestic terrorists. Okay, so segregation of public transportation, 1881. This is why I'm for the FBI hunting down every last one of these goddamn domestic terrorists and prosecute them to the full extent for the law. I'm rooting for the FBI. I know they're against Dr. King and all that. No, I'm rooting for the FBI, Merrick Garland, Kristen Clark. I want them to hunt down every last one of these goddamn domestic terrorists who are trying to overthrow the government. They've already arrested 850 and charged them, and they're prosecuting them now. You just had a former police officer, former white police officer, who just got convicted. He's getting 7 years. Involved in this domestic terrorist. Okay, there's another 1,200 of these domestic terrorists that the FBI is looking for. Drop a dime on these people. I'm rooting for the FBI. Okay, no, we don't want African Americans unjustly persecuted, things like that. I'm rooting for the FBI. If I could join the FBI and hunt down these domestic terrorists, I would do it. Oh, hell no. Because this goes back to why the Department of Justice was created in the first place, going back to 1870 during Reconstruction. Let's take it back to a Reconstruction era. This is how all this history is connected. Okay. The first Attorney General under the Department of Justice, 1870, Amos T. Ackerman, created 150 years ago. The Justice Department's first mission was to protect Black rights. And that's exactly what they're doing today. And the best way to do that is to go after these domestic terrorists. In the wake of the Civil War, the government's new force sought to enshrine equality under the law, July 1st, 2020. Okay, now this caricature here, a cartoon by illustrator Thomas Nast. Thomas Nast is also the illustrator who's going to create the image of what we know as Santa Claus coming from center class. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. We talked about that in my class on Saturday. A cartoon by illustrator Thomas Nast shows a member of the White League, which was another domestic terrorist organization, because they're involved in the Eufaula massacre of 1874 in Alabama, the White League. It wasn't just the Ku Klux Klan. And just because somebody puts on a white sheet and a hood don't mean they're a member of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan was a fraternal organization. They had bylaws. There was an intake process to become a Klan member. So just because somebody wears a white sheet and a hood doesn't mean they're a member of the Klan. A cartoon by illustrator Thomas Nast shows a member of the White League and a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Keep in mind, member of the Klan. That was a fraternal organization originally founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. It shows them joining hands over a terrorized Black family. Okay. And it says here, the Union as it was, this is a white man's government, the lost cause, worse than slavery. So the lost cause was this about 150-year effort to rewrite the history of the Civil War and teach this revisionist history and say that the South seceded from the Union for states' rights not to maintain slavery, all this nonsense, okay? Amos T. Ackerman was an unlikely figure to head the newly formed Department of Justice. In 1870, the United States was still working to bind up the nation's wounds, torn open by the Civil War. During this period of Reconstruction, once again, this deals with this period of history, Reconstruction. During this period, and where's that article? I got that article here printed. Right, okay. Because I got all these, I have thousands of articles printed. I'm in the process of organizing the office and putting all this, more of this stuff in file folders. I got stacks of articles all over the place. During this period of Reconstruction, the federal government committed itself to guaranteeing, check this out, the federal government committed itself to guaranteeing full citizenship rights to all Americans, regardless of race. At the forefront of that effort was Amos T. Ackerman, a former Democrat and enslaver from Georgia, former slave owner from Georgia, and a former officer in the Confederate Army. The United States had an attorney general since the formation of the government in 1789, as created by the U.S. Constitution. None had been empowered with the full force of a consolidated legal team quite like Amos T. Ackerman. And none had the monumental task of enforcing the 14th and 15th Amendments and new legislation delivering long overdue rights to 4 million formerly enslaved African-American men and women. So the Department of Justice is formed to enforce these new rights that African-Americans have. This is why more of us need to apply to the Department of Justice. And I would say to go after these domestic terrorists, we need to apply to the FBI also. Oh, yes. No. We need to apply to the FBI and go after, hunt down every last one of these domestic terrorists. This department's work on behalf of the emancipated population was so central to its early mission that Amos T. Ackerman established the department's headquarters in the Freedmen Savings Bank building, because Freedmen's Bank created in 1865 by act of Congress as well, to help African Americans save their money that they're making because they're negotiating labor contracts and things like this, because the U.S. Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, they're helping African Americans do a number of things. They're providing health care, building schools, feeding them, but they're also helping them put their money in the banks also, so the Freedmen's Bank. In the immediate wake of the Civil War, Amos T. Ackerman, a New Hampshireite who settled in Georgia in the 1840s, looked to the future, leaving the Democrats for the Republicans and prosecuting voter intimidation cases as a U.S. district attorney in his adopted state of Georgia. Reflecting on his decision to switch his allegiance to the party of Lincoln, Amos T. Ackerman said, quote, "Some of us who had adhered to the Confederacy felt it to be our duty when we were to participate in the politics of the Union to let the Confederate ideals rule us no longer. Regarding the subjugation of one race by the other as an appurtenance of slavery, we were content that it should go to the grave in which slavery had been buried. We were content that it should go to the grave in which slavery had been buried." Okay. Ackerman's work caught the attention of President Ulysses S. Grant, who was former general in the Union Army during the Civil War, who promoted Amos T. Ackerman to Attorney General in June 1870. On July 1st, 1870, the Department of Justice, created to handle the onslaught of post-Civil War litigation, became an official government department with Amos T. Ackerman at its helm. The focus of his 18-month tenure as the nation's top law enforcement official was the protection of Black voting rights from the systematic violence of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, this is the focus of the first 18 months of the Department of Justice when it comes into existence in 1870. To the protection of Black voting rights from the systematic violence of the Klan and other Klan-like organizations. We add to that, like the White League. Ackerman's Justice Department prosecuted and chased from southern states hundreds of Klan members. Today, the Justice Department is prosecuting many of their descendants who are the domestic terrorists who stormed the U.S. Capitol building January 6, 2021. We need to apply to the Department of Justice and hunt down every last one of these traitors. In the tradition of the Department of Justice, take it back to the old school. In the tradition of the Department of Justice, go after all these coup plotters. Historian William McFeely, in his biography on Amos T. Ackerman, wrote, quote, "Perhaps no attorney general since his tenure has been more vigorous in the prosecution of cases designed to protect the lives and rights of Black Americans." Take it back to the old school. We need to apply to the Department of Justice. That's why I was cheering when Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Rights Division, our sister Kristen Clark, when she was confirmed by the U.S. Senate, and Joe Manchin voted against her, and so did punk ass Senator Tim Scott, Black Republican. He had no excuse for voting against that sister. Luckily, Susan Collin of Maine voted for her. Okay. And then the tie-breaking vote, I think the tiebreaker was Vice President Kamala Harris. So I think it was 51-50, that vote. Okay. You don't get a Kristen Clark as Assistant Attorney General as the Civil Rights Division without voting. That's how she became that. You don't get a Merrick Garland. You don't get them prosecuting these 4 officers involved in killing Breonna Taylor without voting. This one here, where is that? We've got that graphic that I created. Okay, it's AHN show. And this one here should be Breonna Taylor. This right here. Let me pull this graphic up here. This is from our show from last Sunday. We talked about this in Roland Martin Unfiltered. Breonna Taylor update 4 officers charged in the Department of Justice in her killing after 874 days. That's the result of voting. You don't get those charges from the federal government because the Trump administration was not going to charge them. And the Trump administration backed off of holding police officers accountable, and they backed off of the investigation into the patterns and practices of police departments, because it was April of 2021 that the Merrick Garland Justice Department launched a pattern and practice investigation into the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department. You don't get that without voting. And this is Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Rights Division, Kristen Clark. You don't get her without voting. All right. So how's everybody doing? Hopefully you like this type of information. Please register for these online courses. This helps support the African History Network. This helps us finance the research that I do, help support the African History Network show, help us pay some of the bills, etc. Okay, so you can visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, or you can register for the classes. Now, as soon as you register, you start watching the content. You don't have to wait till the next class. We have archived content. You can start watching. You watch the classes we did this weekend. And the best value is the bundle pack. You get both classes for $100. Okay, you get both classes for $100. So we got the information right here at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. This really, really helps us because there's so many things that I want to do. I got to buy new equipment. I want to take this to the next level, but I can't. It costs money to do all that. So this is what it is. All right. So we have the link here in the thread of the broadcast. You can go to our new website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. I built a new website. It costs money to do that as well. I think I had to pay like $180 because with WordPress, they wanted me to pay all. See, with 1-in-1, I could pay each month. WordPress wanted me to pay all the money up front. So I had to pay like $180 to be able to build a new website, and I'm still adding to it. So all this stuff here, this stuff ain't easy. I'm telling you right now. Okay, I guess maybe I'll make it look easy. No, this stuff is not easy. All right. So this is our new website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. And you can go there, and we have the link here in the thread of the broadcast also. So you can register for the classes. The content, I would say, is PG-13. You can use this with your children. And we're getting into selling children's books also. Okay, this was another reason why I'm trying to expand, because I ordered some children's books. We sold it. I got to restock books for African-American children to deal with positive self-esteem, teaching them to love themselves, teaching them history, things like that. So we're expanding. We still sell some DVDs. I'm shifting. I'm going to start. We're shifting more to digital format. We'll still sell some DVDs, but I'm also getting into selling books as well. And I'm working on writing my first book also. So I have 60 pages of my first book written. Hopefully, that's going to cost money to get that published. Hopefully, we'll get that out in September 2022, because it's going to deal with midterm elections also. Okay. So we posted the link here as well, and we have it in the thread of the broadcast. All right. We got to get out of here. And then Cash App, PayPal information is at our website. We have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Hotep, everybody. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. And I want to give a special shout out to everybody who has attended the 11th annual Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. I just want to take a few minutes, and we had a great presentation that I did on Saturday. So I teach 2 online history classes. One on Saturday and one on Sunday. On Saturday, the class that I teach, normally 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And this is normally a 10-week online class. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We can't start studying our history in slavery. Even when we study the transatlantic slave trade, which is important to study, we can't start in 1619 or in the 1440s with the Portuguese, when the Portuguese get involved in the transatlantic slave trade. We have to understand the history chronologically and deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who entered into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, from North Africa in 711 AD. When we discuss the transatlantic slave trade, we have to first understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, and South America, and have been in the land we call the United States at least 51,700 years. Now, the second class I teach is on Sundays, normally 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's called From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Now, these classes are normally $130. They're on sale right now, $60. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded, so you can go back and watch it anytime. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can go back and watch the entire class. With both of these classes, I would say the content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children as well if you want to. Also, you can advertise with the African History Network. We have 3 new advertising packages. Our current promotion is buy 1 month to get 1 month free. We have 1 million followers at our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. And with our platinum package, we'll take out ads on our Facebook fan page for you as well to help maximize your advertising campaign. And we take your 30-second to 60-second commercial, we put into the rebroadcast of our shows, and also into the audio podcast of our shows as well. We only have 20 advertising slots because we have a finite amount of advertising space. Email us at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, or call us 313-462-0003. All right, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever, and we'll talk to you